Okay, I need this explained to me from Back to the Future. So, we all know about Back to the Future. Marty goes back in time to, like, get his parents back together and whatnot. All the movies, you've seen it. But in the movie, Marty comes from a timeline where Marty's dad is kind of a nerd. And then when he comes back to the future from 1955 to 1985, his dad's cool. And it makes me think, like, what happens, like, how does Marty still remember everything from the previous timeline and not, like, an entirely different person? And this is explained in the second movie where Doc states that when he goes back in time, like, there's one timeline, but when Marty goes back, he creates a separate timeline, and that's the one he's in, right? Like, in this one, he's a nerd, right? Marty's dad is a nerd. But we go to this timeline, he's not a nerd, he's cool, right? And in that case, according to Doc, that means there's a Marty for each individual timeline. So now, Marty, on this timeline where he's a nerd, goes to the timeline where he's not a nerd. So that means, and same thing with this Marty, he'll go back in time and create a new timeline. So that this Marty will end up creating a new timeline like that. But something I'm wondering now is, since Marty left this timeline to go to the new timeline where his dad's cool, does that mean in this timeline right here that supposedly still exists according to the movies, is Marty just dead in that universe? Like, does his family think that he's just dead now because he's technically left it? Like, and that's not to mention the fact that technically they create a third timeline in the movie because of Marty going back in time and giving the book to Biff, which makes, a whole new timeline. But then he goes back, but then, Marty goes to this timeline, but then he goes back to the second timeline, whatever. And then they create a third timeline in the third movie, because in the third movie at the beginning, Marty's not in the picture with Doc from the 1885, but at the end of the movie he is. So that means there's like 4 or 5 different timelines that, like, Marty's just, like, dead in all of them. So, like, what is Marty just, like, creating a bunch of universes where he's died multiple times? Like, in every universe he's pretty much dead except for, like, the last one at the end of the third movie. So, like, this is the only one that Marty survives. Can someone explain this to me, please? Because that's my stance on how this works. Marty's just dead except for that last one. Someone explain, please.